20 feet beneath Tennessee soil lay artifacts that would force archaeologists to rewrite North American history. Ancient copper tablets bearing inscriptions that predated any known civilization on the continent. A discovery made not by trained scientists, but by one desperate mother digging a simple drainage ditch to save her crumbling farm from foreclosure. What Rebecca Hartley unearthed that October morning would bring the Smithsonian director racing to Cedar Ridge in a government helicopter and transform a failing dairy farm into the most significant archaeological site of the 21st century. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The fog rolled thick across Copper Creek Valley as Rebecca Hartley pulled on her grandfather's old work boots, their leather cracked and worn from 3 generations of Tennessee farming. At 36, she faced the kind of morning that would determine whether her children had breakfast tomorrow or joined the growing statistics of rural homelessness. The foreclosure notice, tucked beneath a coffee-stained mug on the kitchen counter, gave her exactly 11 days to produce a miracle. The farm had been in her family since 1892, when her great-great-grandfather had won the deed in a poker game, or so family legend claimed. Now 320 acres of red clay soil and struggling pasture land represented both her greatest burden and her only hope. The property taxes alone had devoured her savings after the divorce, and the custody battle with Michael had cost her everything else, including her pride. Emma and Noah, her 7-year-old twins, still slept upstairs in the room where she herself had dreamed childhood dreams. Their trust in her ability to provide weighed heavier than any mortgage. She'd already sold the good furniture, pawned her grandmother's silver, and taken every shift the local diner would give her. The farm equipment auction next week represented her final option, though she knew the rusted machinery would barely cover the lawyer's fees. James Crawford, the real estate agent, had been honest during yesterday's assessment. The land's been over-farmed, Rebecca. Soil tests show mineral depletion, and with the creek running dry most summers now, buyers see liability, not opportunity. He'd suggested subdividing, selling parcels to developers eager to build vacation homes for Nashville executives seeking mountain retreats. The thought of bulldozers carving up her ancestral land felt like betrayal, but homelessness felt worse. The roosters began their morning chorus as Rebecca walked the fence line, mentally cataloging sellable assets. The old dairy barn listed dangerously southward, its foundation cracked by decades of freeze-thaw cycles. The equipment shed housed more mice than machinery. Even the Victorian farmhouse, once the pride of Cedar Ridge, showed its age through. Peeling paint and sagging porches. Near the eastern boundary, where Copper Creek bent sharply around a limestone outcropping, erosion had carved deep gullies into the pasture. The county extension office had warned her about runoff issues, suggesting expensive drainage solutions she couldn't afford. Instead, she'd borrowed a neighbor's excavator, planning to dig simple ditches that might buy her another season. The morning air carried the scent of wood smoke and damp earth as she climbed into the excavator's cab. She'd learned to operate heavy machinery as a teenager, helping her father clear storm damage after tornado season. The diesel engine coughed to life, black smoke dissipating into the fog as she maneuvered toward the worst erosion. Her plan seemed straightforward enough. Dig a series of channels directing water away from the topsoil, maybe save enough pasture to support a small herd next spring. If she could show potential buyers active agricultural use, perhaps the asking price might inch higher. Every $1,000 mattered when you measured success in grocery bills and school supplies. The excavator's bucket bit into the red clay with satisfying resistance. Rebecca had always found comfort in physical work, in problems that yielded to sweat and determination. Unlike custody hearings or legal documents, the earth responded predictably. Dig deep enough, angle correctly, and water flowed where you directed it. 2 hours into the work, she encountered unexpected resistance. The bucket scraped against something harder than limestone, producing a sound like fingernails on stone. Probably construction debris, she thought, remembering stories of old foundations scattered across the property. The original settlement had included several outbuildings, long since reclaimed by forest and time. She repositioned the excavator, approaching from a different angle. This time, the bucket caught edge of something flat and substantial. Not the rounded surface of buried stones, but an artificial plane extending beyond her excavation. Curiosity trumped exhaustion as she widened the hole, revealing what appeared to be a stone slab, roughly 6 feet square. The morning sun had burned through the fog by the time Rebecca climbed down to investigate. She ran her hands across the surface, feeling carved indentations too regular for natural formation. Grabbing a brush from the toolbox, she cleared away clay and debris, revealing intricate symbols carved deep into the stone. The designs resembled nothing she'd seen before, not the Cherokee petroglyphs documented throughout Tennessee, nor the settler graffiti common on old boundary markers. These symbols displayed mathematical precision, their lines intersecting at perfect angles, forming patterns that seemed simultaneously ancient and advanced. Rebecca's heart raced as she photographed the stone with her phone, the images barely capturing the complexity of the carvings. She'd grown up hearing stories of indigenous cultures in the Cumberland Mountains, of sacred sites and burial grounds protected by federal law. If this proved to be Native American heritage, construction would stop immediately, preserving the land from development but potentially tanking its commercial value. The thought should have worried her, but something about the stone felt different. The symbols didn't match any indigenous writing systems she'd seen in local museums. They appeared almost crystalline in structure, as if depicting molecular diagrams or astronomical charts rather than pictographic language. Using hand tools now, she carefully excavated around the slab's edges, revealing precisely cut corners and a thickness of nearly 8 inches. No natural formation possessed such geometric perfection. Someone had shaped this stone with advanced tools, transporting and placing it with deliberate purpose. By noon, she'd exposed enough to recognize the slab as a capstone covering something beneath. The realization sent chills through her, despite the climbing temperature. She thought of Egyptian tombs, of Mayan temples, of archaeological discoveries that redefined historical understanding. But this was Tennessee, where documented human habitation stretched back mere thousands of years, not the deep time of other continents. Emma and Noah found her there after school, still digging despite blistered hands and aching shoulders. "Mama's ain't playing in the dirt," Noah announced, his gap-toothed grin infectious. Emma, always the more observant twin, noticed the unusual stone immediately. "What's that writing, Mama? It looks like alien symbols from our space books." The innocent observation struck Rebecca with unexpected force. The symbols did possess an otherworldly quality, their precision suggesting advanced mathematics rather than primitive carving. She dismissed her own similar thoughts as fanciful, but hearing the comparison from a child's unbiased perspective reinforced the stone's anomalous nature. "Help me clear more dirt away," she suggested, handing them small brushes. The twins attacked the task with enthusiasm, their chatter providing normal soundtrack to extraordinary discovery. As they worked, Rebecca's mind raced through implications. If this proved significant, if archaeologists became involved, the farm's fate would shift dramatically. By sunset, they'd exposed the full capstone and identified the seam where it met. Supporting walls, the construction showed sophisticated engineering, with interlocking stones forming an underground chamber. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Rebecca knew she should stop. should contact authorities, should preserve the site for professional excavation. But foreclosure loomed, and she needed to understand what lay beneath before surrendering control. That evening, after tucking the twins into bed with promises of continued adventure tomorrow, Rebecca sat at her grandmother's desk, researching archaeological protocols. Tennessee law required reporting significant historical finds, particularly on private property slated for sale, but definitions of significant varied, and she'd discovered only carved stone so far. She uploaded her photographs to reverse image search engines, finding no matches for the symbols. Forums dedicated to ancient languages yielded similarly blank results. Whatever she'd found predated digital documentation existing beyond current academic understanding. Sleep came fitfully, interrupted by dreams of underground chambers and impossible antiquity. She woke before dawn, drawn back to the excavation as if magnetized. The morning mist clung to the valley, shrouding the site in ethereal atmosphere that enhanced its mysterious nature. Working alone, Rebecca managed to lift one corner of the capstone using a jack and wooden blocks. The space beneath exhaled air that smelled of centuries, carrying hints of copper and ozone. Her flashlight beam penetrated the darkness, revealing a chamber carved from solid limestone, its walls covered in the same precise symbols found on the capstone. But the true marvel lay centered on the chamber floor. A collection of copper plates, each roughly the size of a legal pad, stacked with mathematical precision. The metal showed no signs of oxidation, maintaining a warm, reddish glow, despite what must have been centuries of entombment. Each plate bore dense inscriptions, symbols, arranged in patterns suggesting written language far more complex than any known ancient script. Rebecca's hands trembled as she photographed everything, the camera flash revealing additional details carved into the chamber walls. Star charts, or what appeared to be star charts, showing constellations in configurations that didn't match. Current night skies, mathematical proofs extending beyond her understanding, diagrams of structures that seemed to blend architectural and biological forms. She knew, with absolute certainty, that she'd discovered something unprecedented. Not mere indigenous artifacts or colonial remnants, but evidence of a civilization that shouldn't have existed in pre-Columbian North America. The copper plates alone defied explanation. Their preservation suggested metallurgical knowledge far beyond contemporary understanding of ancient capabilities. The prudent course involved immediate reporting to archaeological authorities, but Rebecca had survived single motherhood by trusting her instincts, and something about this discovery felt intensely personal. The location, mere hundreds of yards from the farmhouse where her family had lived for generations, seemed too coincidental. Had her ancestors known? Had they protected this secret through decades of hardship and agricultural struggle? She carefully removed one copper plate, wrapping it in cloth before returning to the house. Under magnification, the inscriptions revealed even greater complexity. Symbols within symbols, each character containing nested information like mathematical fractals. The writing system appeared designed for minds that processed information in ways modern humans could barely comprehend. As she studied the plate, Rebecca noticed recurring symbol clusters that might represent names or titles. One sequence appeared more frequently than others, always in prominent positions, suggesting importance. She traced these symbols onto paper, feeling an odd familiarity despite their alien nature. The morning mail brought fresh anxiety. Another notice from the bank, this one threatening sheriff's sale if mortgage arrears weren't addressed within 7 days. The timeline had compressed, forcing decisions she wasn't prepared to make. Yet somehow, the financial crisis felt secondary to the archaeological magnitude of her discovery. Rebecca glanced toward the excavation site, barely visible through kitchen windows. Whatever civilization had created those artifacts had possessed knowledge that modern science was only beginning to explore. The chamber's contents could revolutionize understanding of human development, challenging fundamental assumptions about technological progress and cultural evolution. But revelations of such magnitude attracted attention of all kinds. Academic institutions would descend like locusts, each claiming precedence. Government agencies would invoke security concerns. Private collectors would offer astronomical sums for artifacts that belonged in museums. And somewhere in that chaos, a single mother might lose both her land and her children if she couldn't navigate the approaching storm. The twins' laughter echoed from upstairs, reminding Rebecca of priorities that transcended archaeological significance. She needed to protect her family first, ensuring their security before unleashing discoveries that would transform academic paradigms. The copper plate felt warm in her hands, its symbols seeming to shift in peripheral vision, like living text awaiting translation. Tomorrow, she would make decisions that rippled through history. Tonight, she remained simply a mother, fighting to save her home, unaware that her desperate excavation had unearthed evidence of a lost civilization whose technological achievements would force humanity to reconsider its own origins and potential. The Hartley farm, worthless in real estate terms, had become priceless to human understanding, though that transformation would bring challenges far exceeding financial hardship. As stars emerged in the Tennessee sky, Rebecca studied the ancient star charts she'd photographed, noting discrepancies that suggested either astronomical error or temporal displacement. The implications sent shivers through her exhausted frame. Whatever civilization had built that chamber understood principles modern science struggled to grasp. And somehow, improbably, their legacy had remained hidden beneath her struggling dairy farm, waiting for desperate circumstances to force its revelation. The next morning would bring decisions that changed everything. But for now, Rebecca Hartley sat in her grandmother's kitchen, holding impossibilities in her hands while her children slept peacefully above, blissfully unaware that their mother had just discovered evidence that would redefine human history and transform their humble farm into the most important archaeological site in North America. The morning brought neither clarity nor comfort as Rebecca Hartley stared at the copper plate she'd retrieved from the underground chamber. Its symbols seemed to pulse with meaning just beyond comprehension, like words on the tip of her tongue that refused to form. The twins had already left for school, their excited chatter about Mama's treasure echoing through empty hallways as the bus carried them away. Financial reality intruded through her phone's insistent buzzing. Michael's lawyer demanding documentation for next week's custody hearing. The electric company threatening disconnection. The mortgage officer scheduling a property assessment that would determine foreclosure proceedings. Each message tightened the vice of desperation that had driven her to dig that drainage ditch in the first place. Yet the archaeological magnitude of her discovery dwarfed these immediate concerns. The copper plates represented technological sophistication that shouldn't have existed in pre-Columbian America. Their preservation alone defied metallurgical understanding, while the inscriptions suggested a written language more complex than any known ancient script. Rebecca made her decision over reheated coffee and stale toast. She would document everything meticulously before alerting authorities, not for profit or fame, but for leverage. If the farm held archaeological treasures, perhaps she could negotiate terms that protected her family's interests while preserving historical artifacts for proper study. She spent the morning photographing the chamber from every angle, creating detailed sketches of symbol patterns and architectural features. The Saku's star charts particularly fascinated her. They showed celestial configurations that didn't match current astronomical positions, suggesting either remarkable age or origin from different latitudes entirely. The chamber's construction revealed engineering principles beyond primitive capabilities. Stones fitted together with microscopic precision, forming joints that remained watertight after centuries. The walls curved inward slightly, creating acoustic properties that amplified whispers while dampening echoes. Every detail suggested builders who understood advanced mathematics and physics. By afternoon, Rebecca had documented 17 copper plates, each bearing unique inscriptions. Some appeared to be technical diagrams, showing devices of impossible complexity. Others resembled biological illustrations, depicting organisms that didn't correspond to any known species. A few plates seemed to merge the mechanical and organic, presenting hybrid structures that challenged the boundaries between technology and life. The recurring symbol cluster she'd noticed earlier appeared on every plate, always in positions of prominence. She began thinking of it as a signature or seal, marking the artifacts with common ownership. The pattern felt frustratingly familiar, as if she'd seen similar designs in dreams or childhood memories too vague to grasp. Working methodically, she created a catalog system for her findings. Each plate received a number, with corresponding notes about symbol patterns, apparent subject matter, and placement within the chamber. The organizational process felt oddly natural, as if she'd performed similar archival work in some half-forgotten past. As shadows lengthened across Copper Creek Valley, Rebecca made a disturbing discovery. Several plates contained what appeared to be maps, but not of terrain she recognized. The topographical features suggested massive mountain ranges and vast inland seas where none existed today. Either the maps depicted unknown continents, or North American geography had changed dramatically since their creation. The implications sent her scrambling for geological references. Ice ages could alter landscapes, but not to the extent these maps suggested. Tectonic activity might explain some discrepancies, but the time frames required stretched into millions of years. Yet, the chamber's construction appeared far more recent, perhaps only millennia old, rather than geological epochs. Emma and Noah returned from school to find their mother surrounded by notebooks and printouts, the dining table converted into a research center. "Are we rich now, Mama?" Emma asked with 7-year-old directness. "Did you find pirate treasure?" Rebecca pulled her daughter close, breathing in the scent of chalk dust and playground adventures. "Not pirate treasure, sweetheart. Something much older and more important. But I need to understand it better before we tell anyone else." Noah studied the photographs with intense concentration. "These pictures look like the patterns in my dreams sometimes, the ones with the floating buildings and people made of light." The casual observation stopped Rebecca cold. She'd never paid much attention to Noah's fantastical bedtime stories, dismissing them as normal childhood imagination. Now she wondered if her son possessed some inherited sensitivity to whatever culture had created these artifacts. That evening, after the twins were asleep, Rebecca descended into the chamber again. She'd rigged work lights powered by the farm's generator, illuminating details invisible by flashlight. The walls revealed additional complexities, microscopic inscriptions covering every surface like fractal wallpaper, each magnification revealing deeper layers of information. One section particularly caught her attention. A series of connected diagrams seemed to trace a genealogical progression, showing human-like figures evolving or transforming across generations. The earliest images appeared almost crystalline, geometric forms arranged in vaguely humanoid configurations. Subsequent illustrations showed gradual changes, the angular beings becoming more organic, more recognizably human, until the final panels depicted figures indistinguishable from modern people. The progression reminded her uncomfortably of her own recurring dreams, visions of impossibly tall beings with luminous skin teaching early humans agriculture, mathematics, and metallurgy. She'd always dismissed these nighttime fantasies as her mind's way of processing the stress of single parenthood and financial pressure. Working through the night, Rebecca carefully removed all 43 copper plates, wrapping each in acid-free cloth and storing them in the house's limestone cellar. The chamber held other artifacts too, crystalline rods that hummed with subtle vibration when touched, metallic spheres containing intricate mechanical components, and what appeared to be viewing devices with lenses ground to impossible precision. One particular artifact defied classification entirely, a cube of unknown material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, creating a void in space that hurt to observe directly. When Rebecca tried to lift it, the cube felt simultaneously weightless and impossibly dense, as if its mass fluctuated based on intention rather than physics. She left the anomalous cube in the chamber, focusing instead on artifacts she could document and understand. The copper plates alone would revolutionize archaeological theory. The other objects might require decades of study before yielding their secrets. Dawn found her exhausted but exhilarated, surrounded by evidence of a lost civilization that had achieved technological mastery beyond current human capability. The farmhouse felt different now, charged with the weight of revelation. She wondered how many generations of Hartleys had lived above this chamber, unaware of the treasures beneath their feet. The mailbox held fresh threats, legal documents from Michael's attorney questioning her fitness as a parent, given the farm's impending foreclosure. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. She'd discovered artifacts worth fortunes to private collectors, yet remained too broke to buy groceries without counting pennies. Rebecca spent Saturday creating detailed inventories while the twins played in the yard. She established provenance for each artifact, documenting its position within the chamber and relationship to other objects. The work felt crucial, as if she were racing against some undefined deadline. Her grandmother's journals, stored in the attic since Helen Hartley's death 3 years ago, suddenly seemed relevant. Rebecca had barely glanced through them during the estate settlement, focused then on immediate survival rather than family history. Now she wondered if they might contain clues about the chamber's existence. The journals revealed a complex woman she'd barely known. Helen Hartley had been a nurse during World War II, serving in field hospitals across Europe. But her entries suggested involvement in activities beyond medical duties. Cryptic references to special projects and classified findings hinted at intelligence work or scientific research. One passage stood out. The Hartley burden passes to each generation, though few recognize its weight. We are guardians of truths too large for ordinary comprehension, keepers of keys to doors that must remain closed until humanity grows ready for what lies beyond. Rebecca read the words repeatedly, their meaning shifting like the copper plate symbols. Had her grandmother known about the chamber? The journal entries grew increasingly oblique after Helen's return to Tennessee, as if she feared documentation of certain subjects. Another entry, dated just months before Helen's death: "I've failed to prepare Elizabeth properly. My daughter rejects the subtle trainings, dismisses the family gifts as coincidence and imagination. Perhaps the burden will skip a generation as it has before. Perhaps Rebecca will prove more receptive when her time comes." The revelation staggered Rebecca. Her grandmother had known, had tried to prepare her mother, who had apparently rejected whatever legacy the Hartleys carried. Now, circumstances had forced Rebecca to discover what previous generations had either protected or ignored. She found more references scattered throughout the journals, mentions of resonance sensitivity and pattern recognition gifts that seemed hereditary in the Hartley line. Helen described dreams remarkably similar to Rebecca's own, visions of tall beings teaching primitive humans advanced concepts through symbolic languages. Sunday morning brought new urgency. The twins reported strange visitors at the school fence, well-dressed adults asking questions about their mother's recent activities. The description matched neither social workers nor Michael's legal team, raising troubling possibilities about word spreading beyond Cedar Ridge. Rebecca made two decisions that would prove pivotal. First, she would contact Dr. Catherine Brooks at the Smithsonian, a name she'd found in her grandmother's correspondence. Second, she would prepare contingencies protecting her family if the discovery attracted dangerous attention. The email to Dr. Brooks was carefully worded, mentioning the Hartley name and referencing architectural anomalies requiring discrete archaeological assessment. She attached a single photograph, the least remarkable copper plate bearing primarily geometric patterns rather than obvious written language. While awaiting response, Rebecca explored the chamber more thoroughly. A narrow passage, previously hidden behind a sliding stone panel, led to a second room. This space contained what appeared to be a library, with thousands of thin metallic sheets stored in crystalline containers. Each sheet bore microscopic inscriptions, visible only under magnification. The organizational system suggested vast knowledge categorized by subject matter. One section seemed devoted to mathematics, with proofs and equations extending far beyond current human understanding. Another contained biological information, including detailed DNA-like structural diagrams predating the discovery of genetics by millennia. But the most unsettling section appeared to be historical records. Sheet after sheet depicted the rise and fall of civilizations, some recognizable from conventional archaeology, others completely unknown. The timeline suggested cyclical patterns of advancement and collapse, with humanity repeatedly approaching technological sophistication before suffering catastrophic setbacks. Rebecca photographed everything, building an archive that would reshape historical understanding. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that she was meant to find this, that her family's multi-generational presence on this land served a purpose beyond simple farming. Dr. Brooks responded within hours, her message terse but interested. She would arrive Tuesday morning for preliminary assessment, traveling alone to maintain discretion. Her postscript added, "Your grandmother spoke of you often. She believed you would eventually contact me." The connection to Helen Hartley raised new questions. How deeply had her grandmother been involved with archaeological circles? What had she known about the family land? The journals hinted at layers of secrecy extending back generations. Monday passed in final preparations. Rebecca secured the most sensitive artifacts, creating multiple documentation copies stored in separate locations. She rehearsed plausible explanations for the discovery that wouldn't immediately suggest its full magnitude. The twins received careful instructions about discussing their home with strangers. That evening, Emma approached with one of her drawings. "I made this for the underground room," she said, presenting a crayon illustration that stopped Rebecca's breath. The child had perfectly reproduced one of the copper plate symbols, the recurring signature pattern Rebecca had noticed throughout the artifacts. "Where did you see this design, sweetheart?" Emma shrugged with 7-year-old nonchalance. "It's in my dreams sometimes. The tall people draw it in the air and it glows. They say it means remember or protect or something like that. I thought it would look nice in your treasure room." The innocent explanation carried staggering implications. If Emma could accurately reproduce symbols from artifacts she hadn't seen, what other knowledge might the twins carry in their genetic memory? The Hartley family's connection to this site ran deeper than mere land ownership. That night, Rebecca dreamed more vividly than ever before. The tall beings from her recurring visions appeared with unprecedented clarity, their crystalline, forms pulsing with internal light. They gestured toward the sky, where unfamiliar constellations blazed. One figure approached, touching her forehead with a hand that felt both solid and insubstantial. Images flooded her consciousness, the rise of their civilization on Earth. During humanity's prehistory, their gradual transformation from pure energy beings into physical forms, their decision to guide human development while remaining hidden. She saw vast cities of living crystal hidden beneath mountains, technologies that merged consciousness with matter, and the slow decline that forced most of their kind to abandon physical existence. The vision culminated with a revelation that jerked her awake, gasping. The Hartleys weren't just accidental landowners above an ancient site. They were descendants, carrying diluted genetic traces of the original builders. Each generation produced individuals with varying degrees of sensitivity to the inherited memories and capabilities. The bedside clock showed 3:33 a.m., a time her grandmother's journals had mentioned as significant for the family. Rebecca rose, drawn to the window overlooking the excavation site. The exposed chamber seemed to glow faintly in moonlight. Or perhaps her awakened perceptions detected emanations invisible to ordinary sight. By dawn, she understood her role with startling clarity. The financial desperation that had driven her to dig that drainage ditch wasn't coincidence, but catalyst. The Hartley line had maintained unconscious guardianship for generations, but circumstances now demanded active participation. The world approached revelations that would challenge fundamental beliefs about human origins and potential. Dr. Brooks would arrive in hours, beginning a process that would transform the failing farm into an archaeological sensation. But Rebecca now grasped larger implications. The copper plates contained more than historical records. They held instructions for awakening dormant capabilities within human genetic code, abilities that her family had preserved through bloodline and proximity. To the ancient site, the twins ate breakfast chattering about school projects while their mother contemplated revolutionary secrets. Outside, morning mist rose from Copper Creek Valley like the breath of sleeping giants. The land itself seemed expectant, as if the long-buried chamber had waited specifically for this moment, this generation, this convergence of necessity and destiny. Rebecca touched the copper plate she'd kept close, feeling its symbols resonate with something deep in her cellular memory. The foreclosure notice still lay on the counter, but its threat had transformed into opportunity. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she faced them, knowing the Hartley family's true inheritance wasn't land or wealth, but guardianship of revelations that would reshape humanity's understanding of its past and future. As car wheels crunched on the gravel drive, announcing Dr. Brooks's early arrival, Rebecca took a deep breath. The excavation that began with desperate attempts to save her farm would end by changing the world. The question no longer concerned financial survival, but how to guide that change responsibly, protecting both the ancient knowledge and the family chosen to preserve it. The morning sun broke through the mist, illuminating the farmhouse where countless Hartleys had unknowingly guarded secrets older than civilization. Today, those secrets would begin their emergence into human consciousness, shepherded by a single mother who had discovered that her family's greatest treasure wasn't material, but genetic. A legacy of connection to beings who had shaped human evolution from the very beginning. Dr. Catherine Brooks emerged from her rental car with movements that spoke of academic authority tempered by field experience. In her early 60s, she wore practical clothing suited for excavation work. Her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun that had already begun to escape its pins in the Tennessee humidity. Her eyes, sharp and intelligent behind wire-rimmed glasses, surveyed the Hartley property with professional assessment before settling on Rebecca with unexpected warmth. "You have your grandmother's chin," were her first words, delivered with a slight smile that softened her otherwise serious demeanor. Helen always said the Hartley women carried their determination in their jawline. The personal observation caught Rebecca off guard. She'd prepared for skepticism, possibly condescension from a Smithsonian expert asked to evaluate amateur discoveries. Instead, Dr. Brooks approached with the familiarity of an old friend, despite their never having met. "Thank you for coming so quickly," Rebecca managed, shaking the offered hand. "I wasn't sure my email would be taken seriously." Dr. Brooks's grip was firm, her palm calloused from decades of handling artifacts. "Your grandmother and I corresponded for 40 years. She asked me to watch for contact from you specifically. Though I'll admit, I expected it under different circumstances." They walked toward the excavation site as morning dew sparkled on overgrown pastures. Rebecca noticed how Dr. Brooks moved with purpose, as if she already knew where they were headed. The older woman's eyes tracked across the landscape, pausing at certain points that seemed to hold significance. Helen mentioned the family land. It held historical importance, Dr. Brooks said, her casual tone belied by intense observation of their surroundings. She was quite cryptic about specifics, but insisted that when the time came, I would understand. Rebecca had rehearsed various ways to introduce the discovery, planning to start small and gradually reveal the chamber's full significance. But something about Dr. Brooks's manner suggested deeper knowledge than expected. The archaeologist's presence felt orchestrated, as if Helen Hartley had arranged this meeting from beyond the grave. "What exactly did my grandmother tell you about our family?" Rebecca asked as they neared the excavation. Dr. Brooks paused, choosing her words carefully. She spoke of genetic gifts, of patterns that manifested differently in each generation. She believed your family carried memories in their DNA, knowledge passed down through bloodlines rather than books. I thought it was metaphorical, until I saw your photograph. They stood at the edge of the excavation now, looking down at the exposed capstone. Dr. Brooks inhaled sharply, her professional composure cracking for just a moment. She knelt at the edge, running her fingers along the carved symbols with reverent familiarity. "Sumerian influence, but not quite," she murmured. "Proto-Egyptian elements, yet predating known dynasties, and these mathematical constants." She looked up at Rebecca with eyes wide with academic excitement. This shouldn't exist. Not here, not with these particular symbolic combinations. Rebecca found herself relaxing slightly. Whatever her grandmother had shared, Dr. Brooks clearly possessed the expertise to appreciate the discovery's significance. There's more, much more. They descended into the excavation, Dr. Brooks moving with surprising agility for her age. When Rebecca lifted the capstone to reveal the chamber beneath, the archaeologist's intake of breath echoed in the morning air. She stared into the darkness for long moments before speaking. Helen theorized about pre-Columbian contact with advanced civilizations. She collected anomalous artifacts her entire life, pieces that didn't fit conventional timelines. But this, she gestured toward the chamber, this validates everything she believed. They rigged proper lighting before entering the chamber together. Dr. Brooks's headlamp swept across the walls, illuminating the intricate inscriptions. Her hands trembled as she photographed everything, muttering observations into a digital recorder. The construction techniques alone will revolutionize our understanding of ancient engineering. These joints, the acoustic properties, the preservation. She turned to Rebecca with barely contained excitement. "How much have you explored?" Rebecca led her to the hidden panel and the second chamber beyond. When Dr. Brooks saw the library of metallic sheets, she actually staggered, gripping the wall for support. Her academic demeanor dissolved into something approaching awe. "My God," she whispered, "it's real. Everything Helen suspected, everything she spent her life searching for." She turned to Rebecca with tears streaming down her face. "Do you understand what this means? Human history, everything we thought we knew." "I'm beginning to," Rebecca admitted. "The copper plates I've studied contain information that shouldn't have existed in any ancient civilization. Star charts showing configurations that don't match any historical period. Mathematical proofs we're only now beginning to understand. Biological diagrams that predate the discovery of DNA by millennia." Dr. Brooks nodded, her excitement tempered by growing realization of the discovery's implications. "Your grandmother believed humanity experienced periodic technological peaks, followed by catastrophic declines. She thought evidence of these lost civilizations was deliberately hidden, waiting for the right moment to resurface. They spent hours in the chamber, Dr. Brooks documenting everything with meticulous precision. Her expertise revealed details Rebecca had missed: architectural alignments with astronomical significance, symbolic patterns that encoded complex information, construction techniques that suggested understanding of principles modern science barely grasped. "The metallurgy alone defies explanation," Dr. Brooks noted, examining one of the copper plates. "This alloy shouldn't maintain such stability. The atomic structure has been somehow altered at a quantum level, preventing oxidation through mechanisms we don't understand." As morning stretched toward afternoon, they moved their discussion to the farmhouse kitchen. Rebecca served coffee, while Dr. Brooks spread photographs across the table, her trained eye identifying patterns and connections with remarkable speed. "These beings," she said, pointing to the genealogical progression on the chamber wall, "they appear to be showing their own evolution, or devolution perhaps, from energy-based consciousness into physical form, gradually becoming more human in appearance." Rebecca hesitated before sharing her dreams and the twins' apparent sensitivity to the symbols. Dr. Brooks listened without skepticism, nodding as if such phenomena were expected rather than extraordinary. Helen experienced similar visions. She believed certain genetic lines retained stronger connections to what she called the source consciousness. The Hartley family in particular seemed to manifest these abilities consistently across generations. "But why?" Rebecca asked. "Why would ancient beings embed themselves in human genetics? Why leave their knowledge hidden beneath a Tennessee farm?" Dr. Brooks sipped her coffee thoughtfully. "Perhaps they didn't leave. Perhaps they became us, diluting their original nature through breeding with early humans. The sites like this could be activation points, places where the genetic memories resurface when needed." The conversation was interrupted by the twins returning from school. Emma and Noah burst through the door with typical 7-year-old energy, stopping short when they noticed the stranger. But their usual shyness around adults didn't manifest. Instead, both children approached Dr. Brooks with unusual directness. "You feel like Grandma Helen," Emma announced, studying the archaeologist with disconcerting intensity. "The same color. Inside..." Dr. Brooks knelt to the children's level, her expression soft. "Your grandmother was my dear friend. She told me stories about both of you before you were even born." Noah stepped forward, placing his small hand on Dr. Brooks's arm. "Did she tell you about the tall people? The ones who teach us in dreams?" The archaeologist's eyes widened slightly, but she maintained her gentle demeanor. "She mentioned that special dreams run in your family. Do you see them often?" Both children nodded eagerly, launching into descriptions that aligned disturbingly with the chamber's inscriptions. They spoke of crystalline cities, of beings made of light who showed them symbols that sang, of learning mathematics through colored patterns that shifted like living things. Rebecca watched Dr. Brooks carefully catalog each detail, her academic mind clearly racing to process the implications. The twins' casual revelations confirmed what the artifacts suggested. The Hartley family carried more than land deeds and farm equipment as their inheritance. After settling the children with snacks and homework, the two women returned to serious discussion. Dr. Brooks had made several phone calls during lunch, speaking in careful code to colleagues she trusted. "We need to control how this information emerges," she explained. "The archaeological community will demand immediate access. Government agencies will invoke security protocols. Private collectors will offer millions for even fragments of these artifacts." Rebecca felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. "I can't even afford next month's mortgage payment. How am I supposed to protect something this significant?" Dr. Brooks leaned forward, her expression intense. "Helen established a foundation years ago, officially for historical preservation. In reality, she was preparing for this moment. The paperwork names you as primary beneficiary, with me as scientific advisor. We can activate it immediately." The revelation stunned Rebecca. Her grandmother had orchestrated protection for the discovery before Rebecca even knew it existed. The careful planning suggested Helen had known not just about the chamber, but about the timing of its revelation. "There's something else," Dr. Brooks continued. "The foundation includes provisions for site security, research funding, and most importantly, legal protection against seizure. Helen spent decades crafting ironclad documents that would withstand government challenge. They spent the rest of the afternoon developing strategy. Dr. Brooks would return to Washington immediately, filing paperwork to establish the site as a protected research location. The foundation would purchase the farm from Rebecca at fair market value, resolving her financial crisis while maintaining family control. "We'll need to work quickly," Dr. Brooks warned. "Word will spread, despite our precautions. The symbols you've photographed, the mathematical constants embedded in the inscriptions, certain people monitor for exactly these kinds of patterns." Rebecca thought of the well-dressed strangers Emma had noticed at school. "I think someone's already watching." Dr. Brooks nodded grimly. Helen warned this would happen. She said the knowledge was protected by more than physical concealment, that attempts to misuse it would trigger defensive responses. Defensive responses? She was vague about specifics, but she insisted the site itself would resist improper access, that only those with correct genetic markers could fully interpret the information. As evening approached, they returned to the chamber for final documentation before Dr. Brooks's departure. The archaeologist worked with increasing urgency, as if sensing a narrowing window of opportunity. "There's a pattern to the symbol arrangements," she noted, comparing photographs. "They're not just recording information, they're encoding instructions, but for what?" Rebecca found herself drawn to a particular section of wall inscriptions. The symbols seemed to pulse with meaning just beyond comprehension, like words in a forgotten language, struggling to resurface. Without conscious thought, she began tracing the patterns with her finger. The chamber responded. A low, harmonic vibration built from the stones themselves, a sound felt more than heard. The copper plates resonated in sympathy, their surfaces rippling with patterns of light that shouldn't have been possible. Dr. Brooks stepped back in amazement as the walls began to glow with soft, blue phosphorescence. "Rebecca, what are you're doing? I don't know, it just feels right." The symbols she traced began to rearrange themselves, flowing like liquid metal across the stone surface. New patterns emerged, diagrams that seemed to depict DNA helixes intertwining with crystalline structures. The message was clear even without translation. The beings who created this chamber had embedded their essence into human genetics, waiting for the right conditions to reactivate. The phenomenon lasted only moments before fading, leaving both women shaken. The chamber returned to its previous state, but something fundamental had changed. The air itself felt charged with potential, as if dormant systems had begun preliminary activation sequences. "Helen was right," Dr. Brooks whispered. "The site recognizes you. Your genetic signature must carry stronger traces of the original builders." They emerged from the chamber as sunset painted the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Dr. Brooks packed her equipment with hands that still trembled slightly from the experience. Her professional excitement was now tempered with something approaching reverence. "I'll file the foundation paperwork tonight," she promised. "By tomorrow afternoon, this site will have federal protection. But Rebecca..." She paused, choosing words carefully. "What we witnessed down there suggests this is about more than archaeology. Your family isn't just connected to this site. You're part of its purpose." After Dr. Brooks departed, Rebecca stood in her kitchen, watching the twins complete their homework. Their small hands moved across paper with unconscious grace, occasionally producing symbols that didn't belong in second-grade arithmetic. The children seemed unaware of their departures from standard notation, their minds operating on multiple levels simultaneously. She thought about the chamber's response to her touch, about the genetic memories surfacing in her dreams, about her grandmother's careful preparations spanning decades. The financial desperation that had driven her to that initial excavation now seemed like orchestrated necessity, forcing her to discover what had always been waiting. The mortgage notices still littered her counter, but they'd lost their power to terrify. By tomorrow, the foundation would activate, securing not just her family's future, but the preservation of knowledge that could reshape human understanding. The failing farm would transform into a research site of global significance. As she tucked the twins into bed, Emma asked a question that pierced straight to the heart of their situation. "Mama, are we becoming like the tall people? Is that why we dream about them?" Rebecca smoothed her daughter's hair, considering how to answer. "I think we've always been connected to them, sweetheart. We're just starting to remember." Noah added sleepily, "They're happy we found their messages. They've been waiting a really long time for someone who could understand." That night, Rebecca's dreams took on new clarity. The tall beings appeared not as teachers, but as ancestors, welcoming a descendant who had finally awakened to her heritage. They showed her glimpses of what was to come, the site's transformation, the gradual revelation of ancient knowledge, the role her children would play in bridging human and transhuman consciousness. She woke at dawn with purpose crystallized. The chamber held more than historical artifacts. It contained the keys to humanity's next evolutionary step, carefully preserved by beings who had foreseen the need for their knowledge in this precise moment of human development. The phone rang as she prepared breakfast. Dr. Brooks's voice carried barely contained excitement. "The foundation is activated. Federal protection is in place. And Rebecca, I've been going through Helen's private papers all night. There's so much more she knew, so much she prepared for. Your grandmother wasn't just an amateur archaeologist. She was part of a network that's been watching these sites for generations." "How many sites are there?" "At least 12 confirmed, in North America alone. But yours is special. Helen believed it was the activation key for the entire network, the primary node that would awaken the others when the time was right." Rebecca thought of the chamber's response to her touch, the way the symbols had rearranged themselves as if recognizing her genetic signature. And that time is now? The astronomical alignments, the mathematical constants embedded in the inscriptions, the recurring patterns we're only now able to decode with modern computers. Everything points to this specific period. Helen calculated it would happen in your lifetime. She prepared everything to ensure you'd be in position when the moment arrived. After ending the call, Rebecca stood at her window overlooking the excavation site. The morning mist rose from the earth like the breath of ancient giants stirring from eons of slumber. The land her family had farmed for generations revealed itself as a bridge between humanity's past and future, guarded by bloodlines that carried dormant memories of transcendent origin. The twins joined her, their small bodies radiating warmth against the morning chill. Together they watched the sun rise over Copper Creek Valley, its light catching the exposed stones of the chamber entrance. The failing farm had become a threshold, and they stood as its appointed guardians, ready to shepherd humanity through revelations that would challenge everything previously believed about human origins and potential. The financial crisis that had threatened to destroy their lives had instead awakened their true purpose. The Hartley family's greatest inheritance wasn't land or wealth, but genetic connections to beings who had guided human evolution from its very beginning. Now, as those beings' knowledge prepared to re-emerge into human consciousness, Rebecca understood her role with perfect clarity. She was not just a discoverer of ancient artifacts. She was a bridge between worlds, a genetic key to unlock dormant human potential, a guardian of revelations that would transform humanity's understanding of its past and reshape its future. The mortgage might be paid tomorrow, but the real debt to her ancestors, both human and otherwise, would be repaid through careful stewardship of the extraordinary legacy hidden beneath Tennessee soil. The Foundation's activation moved with startling efficiency. Within 48 hours, discreet security teams had established a perimeter around the Hartley property, using the cover of agricultural inspection protocols. Government documents materialized with Helen Hartley's foresight evident in every clause, creating layers of protection that would take armies of lawyers years to unravel. Rebecca watched unmarked vans arrive with sophisticated equipment, transforming her failing dairy farm into something between a research facility and a fortress. Dr. Brooks coordinated everything from Washington, her voice carrying new authority during their daily calls. The archaeological establishment was being prepared gradually for revelations that would shatter conventional understanding of human prehistory. Meanwhile, the mortgage company received full payment from the Foundation's emergency fund, stopping foreclosure proceedings in their tracks. But these practical matters felt increasingly secondary to what was happening within the chamber itself. Each time Rebecca descended into the ancient space, new sections of wall revealed themselves, as if the structure existed in more dimensions than human perception typically registered. The symbols continued their subtle rearrangements, presenting information in sequences that seemed calibrated to her growing comprehension. The twins' abilities accelerated at an alarming rate. Noah began solving mathematical problems far beyond second-grade level, his homework covered in notations that resembled the chamber inscriptions. Emma developed an uncanny ability to predict events moments before they occurred, her casual observations about visitors or weather patterns proving invariably accurate. The activation is affecting them more strongly than you, Dr. Brooks observed during one of her visits. Their neural pathways are still forming. The genetic memories can establish themselves more fully. Rebecca found herself torn between maternal protectiveness and recognition that her children were becoming something beyond ordinary human understanding. Their dreams now included detailed technical information about technologies that shouldn't exist, biological processes that transcended current scientific knowledge, and cosmological concepts that would challenge theoretical physics. 3 weeks after the initial discovery, the first breakthrough came. Rebecca was alone in the secondary chamber, studying the metallic library sheets, when she experienced what she could only describe as a download. Information flooded her consciousness, not in words or images, but in pure conceptual understanding. She suddenly knew how to read the inscriptions, not through translation, but through direct comprehension. The library contained the complete history of the beings who had created it. They called themselves the architects, a species that had evolved beyond physical form, but chose to incarnate periodically to guide younger civilizations. Earth had been one of many projects, a garden where consciousness could develop through biological evolution. The architects had arrived during humanity's earliest development, not as conquerors, but as gardeners. They had interwoven their genetic patterns with promising hominid species, creating hybrid lines that would eventually produce modern humans. But the process was designed to be self-limiting. As humans evolved, the architect genes would dilute, becoming dormant until specific conditions triggered reactivation. Those conditions were based on astronomical cycles, technological development, and consciousness evolution. When a species reached the threshold of global transformation, capable of either transcendence or self-destruction, the dormant genes would activate in certain bloodlines. These individuals would serve as bridges, helping their species navigate the crucial transition. The Hartley family represented one of the strongest remaining carrier lines. For generations, they had been unconsciously drawn to this site. One of 12 primary nodes in a global network the architects had established. Each node contained similar chambers, similar libraries, similar activation protocols, waiting for the right genetic keys. As this knowledge integrated into Rebecca's understanding, she felt her own consciousness expanding. She could perceive energy patterns invisible moments before, could sense the vast network of similar sites pulsing with awakening power across the globe. The financial desperation that had forced her to dig that drainage ditch hadn't been coincidence, but cosmic timing, ensuring she would discover the chamber at precisely the moment humanity needed its contents. Dr. Brooks arrived the next morning to find Rebecca transformed. The archaeological expert stopped short upon seeing her, recognition flashing across her weathered features. "It's happened, hasn't it? The full activation." Rebecca nodded, still adjusting to her expanded awareness. She could perceive Dr. Brooks's own genetic patterns now, seeing the faint traces of architect heritage that had drawn her to archaeology, to Helen Hartley, to this moment. "You carry the genes too, though more diluted. That's why grandmother chose you." Helen suspected as much. She said I had the markers, just not strong enough for full activation. She needed someone who could understand the science, but wouldn't be overwhelmed by the inheritance. They spent hours discussing the implications. The chamber's contents would need to be revealed gradually, allowing humanity time to adjust to each paradigm-shifting revelation. The mathematical proofs alone would revolutionize physics. The biological information would transform medicine. The historical records would require complete revision of anthropology and archaeology, but the deeper purpose transcended academic knowledge. The architect's genetic engineering had been designed to produce a species capable of conscious evolution, of choosing its own transformation rather than having it imposed. Humanity stood at that threshold now, facing existential challenges that required expanded consciousness to navigate. The twins demonstrated this potential daily. Noah had begun perceiving what he called pattern streams, probability flows, that allowed him to predict complex outcomes with startling accuracy. Emma developed healing abilities, her touch accelerating recovery from minor injuries and illnesses. Both children treated these capabilities as natural extensions of human potential rather than supernatural phenomena. Word of the discovery inevitably leaked despite security protocols. International teams of scientists requested access. Government agencies demanded oversight. Religious groups proclaimed everything from divine revelation to demonic deception. The media caught fragments of the story, spinning theories that ranged from ancient aliens to elaborate hoaxes. Dr. Brooks managed the external pressures with remarkable skill, using the Foundation's legal protections to control access while preparing the scientific community for regulated exposure to the site's contents. The first official revelation would be geological, proof that the chamber's construction predated known human civilization by millennia. Each subsequent disclosure would build on established facts, leading skeptics step by step toward the greater truth. Rebecca focused on her role as genetic bridge. The chamber continued revealing new sections, each containing information calibrated to her expanding comprehension. She learned about the architects' other projects on distant worlds, their philosophy of guided evolution, their decision to embed themselves so deeply in humanity's development that they effectively became part of the species they were nurturing. The copper plates revealed specific protocols for the transition period humanity was entering. Climate change, technological singularity, potential space expansion. All were anticipated challenges the architects had observed in countless developing civilizations. The information wasn't meant to provide easy solutions, but to expand human consciousness enough to find its own answers. One particularly significant plate detailed what the architects called the choice point, the critical juncture where a species either transcended its limitations or succumbed to them. Humanity's choice point involved multiple factors: ecological, sustainability, artificial intelligence integration, genetic modification ethics, and consciousness evolution. The species could fragment, with different populations choosing different paths, or unite in a collective transformation. The twins' rapid development suggested one possible path. Their abilities represented not mutation, but activation of dormant genetic potential present in all humans to varying degrees. As more carrier families discovered their heritage, as more node sites activated worldwide, these capabilities would spread through the population, not through breeding, but through resonance. Consciousness itself becoming contagious. 6 months after her initial discovery, Rebecca stood before an assembly of the world's leading scientists, government officials, and cultural leaders. The gathering was secret, held in a facility constructed specifically for this purpose near the Hartley farm. Dr. Brooks had orchestrated everything, following protocols Helen Hartley had outlined decades ago. What you're about to see challenges fundamental assumptions about human origins and potential, Rebecca began, her voice carrying new authority born from genetic awakening. The evidence is incontrovertible, the implications transformative. We stand at a threshold our ancestors anticipated and prepared for. She presented the archaeological evidence methodically. Construction techniques that required technology beyond current capability, metallurgy that defied known chemistry, inscriptions containing mathematical constants discovered only in recent decades. The assembled experts listened with growing amazement as each piece of evidence built upon the last. But when Rebecca displayed the genetic analyses showing architect markers in significant percentages of the human population, the room erupted in heated debate. The implications were staggering. Humanity was not purely Earth-evolved, but a hybrid species carrying dormant capabilities that were now activating according to ancient design. This activation isn't random, Rebecca explained, displaying brain scans of the twins and other identified carriers. It's happening in response to global conditions that match parameters established millennia ago. We're not becoming something foreign to human nature. We're completing a developmental process that was always part of our species' trajectory. The presentation continued for hours, covering the network of sites, the expanding abilities in carrier families, the philosophical implications of guided evolution, Religious representatives struggled with theological challenges. Scientists grappled with evidence that shattered materialist assumptions. Government officials worried about social stability as the news inevitably spread. Through it all, Rebecca felt the presence of the architects, not as external beings, but as the activated aspects of human consciousness they had become. Their wisdom flowed through her, providing answers to questions she couldn't have addressed months ago. The transformation from desperate single mother to spokesperson for humanity's next evolutionary phase felt both surreal and inevitable. The gathering concluded with the formation of an international oversight committee, tasked with managing the gradual public revelation of the discoveries. Dr. Brooks was named scientific director, with Rebecca serving as primary consultant on genetic activation protocols. The Hartley farm would remain the principal research site, but similar facilities would be established at each node location as they were identified and activated. Returning home that evening, Rebecca found her children teaching local farm kids games that subtly introduced pattern recognition and probability visualization. The abilities were indeed spreading through resonance, carried by consciousness rather than genes. The architect design revealed its elegance, not imposing change, but enabling it, allowing humanity to guide its own transformation. Michael arrived unexpectedly, his legal team having abandoned the custody battle after witnessing the children's extraordinary capabilities and the government protection surrounding the family. He stood awkwardly on the porch, struggling to reconcile the woman before him with the ex-wife he thought he knew. "I don't understand what's happening," he admitted. "The news reports, the security, the things the kids can do now, none of it makes sense." Rebecca felt compassion for the man who had once shared her life. His genetics carried minimal architect markers, leaving him outside the direct activation process. But she could see potential in him too, dormant capabilities that might awaken through proximity and acceptance. "We're remembering who we've always been," she said simply, "not just as individuals, but as a species. The children are showing us what's possible when those memories fully surface." The months that followed brought accelerating change. Node sites activated across the globe, each revealing similar chambers, similar libraries, similar genetic keys, waiting in local populations. The carrier families found each other through inexplicable synchronicities, forming networks that transcended national boundaries and cultural differences. The twins entered a special educational program designed to nurture their expanding abilities while maintaining childhood normalcy. Other children joined them, their capabilities ranging from enhanced pattern recognition to direct energy manipulation. They approached their gifts with the matter-of-fact acceptance of youth, untainted by adult skepticism about what was possible. Rebecca balanced multiple roles: mother, researcher, genetic bridge, public spokesperson for humanity's transformation. The farmhouse became a pilgrimage site for those experiencing activation symptoms, seeking guidance for abilities they didn't understand. She helped each visitor connect with their inherited potential, watching wonder replace fear as they discovered their part in humanity's larger story. The chamber continued revealing new sections, suggesting it existed in a state of quantum flux, its full dimensions accessible only as human consciousness expanded to perceive them. The deepest levels contained what the architects called the transition protocols, detailed guidance for species-wide metamorphosis that preserved individual identity while enabling collective consciousness. Dr. Brooks documented everything, building an academic framework that would support public revelation when the time came. "We're essentially writing the textbook for conscious evolution," she observed during one late-night research session. "No species has attempted this with full awareness before. The architects usually work through instinct and unconscious development." "That's what makes humanity unique," Rebecca replied. studying a plate that depicted the probability matrices of different evolutionary paths. We're the first of their projects to reach this point with sufficient self-awareness to choose our transformation consciously. It's why they embedded themselves so deeply in our genetics. They wanted to experience this process from the inside. A year passed, then two. The public revelations began slowly, each new disclosure carefully timed to build on growing acceptance of the previous one. Religious institutions adapted their theologies to accommodate evidence of guided evolution. Scientific paradigms shifted to embrace consciousness as a fundamental force rather than an emergent property. Governments struggled to maintain stability as populations awakened to capabilities that transcended traditional power structures. The twins, now 9, had become symbols of humanity's potential. Their abilities continued expanding, but more importantly, they demonstrated the emotional and ethical development necessary to wield such capabilities responsibly. They taught other children who taught their parents, creating ripple effects that spread activation through communities worldwide. Rebecca often stood where it had all begun, at the site of that desperate drainage ditch, marveling at the journey. From financial crisis to species transformation. The farm that nobody wanted had become the most significant location on Earth, the activation point for humanity's next evolutionary phase. On the 3rd anniversary of her discovery, an international ceremony marked the official opening of the Hartley node to qualified researchers and activated individuals. Representatives from every nation attended, acknowledging that humanity's transformation transcended political boundaries. The twins spoke, their young voices carrying wisdom beyond their years, describing a future where expanded human capabilities would solve challenges that seemed insurmountable to baseline consciousness. Dr. Brooks presented her comprehensive analysis of the architect legacy. They didn't abandon us, she concluded. They became us, trusting that when the time came, we would choose transcendence over destruction. Every activated individual represents that trust validated, that bet on human potential paying off. As the ceremony concluded, Rebecca felt a presence she hadn't experienced since the chamber's first activation. The architect's consciousness, now fully integrated with humanity's awakening awareness, communicated through the network of activated individuals worldwide. Their message was simple, yet profound. Welcome to who you've always been becoming. The financial desperation that had driven Rebecca to that fateful excavation felt like a different lifetime. Yet she understood now that every moment of struggle had been necessary, positioning her exactly where she needed to be when humanity required a bridge between its past and future. The mortgage was long paid, but the debt to her expanded human family would be honored through continued service to the transformation. The twins ran ahead through fields where ancient energies pulsed just beneath the surface. Other children joined them, their laughter echoing across Copper Creek Valley as they played games that prepared them for capabilities their parents were only beginning to imagine. The future stretched before them, not as fixed destiny, but as infinite potential waiting to be consciously shaped. Rebecca watched the sunset paint the sky in colors that seemed more vivid than before, her enhanced perception detecting frequencies beyond baseline human vision. The chamber hummed beneath the earth, its purpose fulfilled, yet continuing to serve as a beacon for those still awakening to their inheritance. Humanity had passed its choice point, selecting conscious evolution over unconscious stagnation or destruction. The path ahead would be challenging, requiring wisdom to match expanding capabilities, but the architect legacy ensured they wouldn't walk it alone. Every human carried the potential for transformation, waiting only for the right conditions to emerge. The story that began with a failing farm and a desperate mother had become the story of humanity itself, a species discovering its true nature and choosing to embrace the magnificent responsibility of conscious evolution. The Hartley's land, protected now by international treaty and quantum energy fields, stood as monument to the moment when humanity remembered its purpose and stepped into its cosmic inheritance. As stars emerged in the darkening sky, their ancient light carried new meaning. Some of those points of light marked worlds where the architect's other projects flourished, civilizations that had successfully navigated their own transformations. Earth had joined their ranks, its hybrid children awakening to capabilities that would eventually carry them to the stars and beyond. The chamber waited silently beneath Tennessee soil, its greatest secrets already shared, its purpose transitioning from activation to education. Future generations would study its inscriptions with full comprehension, understanding their heritage and the responsibility it carried. But for now, it served simply as a reminder that sometimes the most profound discoveries come not from seeking, but from surrendering to necessity, allowing desperation to become destiny. Rebecca walked back to the farmhouse where her journey had begun, her children's voices carried on the evening breeze. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new revelations, new opportunities to guide humanity through its metamorphosis. But tonight, she was simply a mother who had dug a ditch to save her family and instead saved the future of human consciousness itself. 5 years had passed since the world first learned of the Hartley discovery, and the transformation of human consciousness had accelerated beyond even the architect's projections. Rebecca stood in the observation tower that now rose above her family's farm, watching dozens of activated individuals work in the expanded research complex below. The failing dairy farm had evolved into the Terran Institute for Consciousness Studies, the premier facility for understanding and nurturing humanity's emerging capabilities. The twins, now 14, led a group of younger children through the meditation gardens, their movements synchronized in a way that suggested shared awareness rather than mere coordination. Emma's healing abilities had developed into something approaching biological mastery. She could perceive and adjust cellular processes with focused intention. Noah's probability visualization had evolved into genuine precognitive clarity, though he'd learned to share such insights carefully to avoid disrupting free will. Dr. Brooks, now Director Emeritus of the Institute, approached with her characteristic purposeful stride. Though in her late 60s, the activation process had granted her renewed vitality, her own latent abilities had emerged gradually, primarily enhanced pattern recognition and what she called archaeological intuition, the ability to perceive the historical resonance of objects and places. The Beijing node reported full activation this morning, she announced, consulting her tablet. That makes 9 of the 12 primary sites operational. The global resonance effect is approaching critical threshold. Rebecca nodded, her expanded awareness already sensing the shift in planetary consciousness. Each activated node added its unique frequency to the growing symphony of awakened human potential. The resistance movements are growing more desperate. Senator Phillips introduced legislation yesterday to classify activated individuals as potential security threats. Fear of the unknown, Dr. Brooks replied, with the weariness of someone who'd spent years combating institutional skepticism. Though it's harder to maintain that fear when activated children keep healing cancer patients and preventing industrial accidents through precognition. They walked through the Institute's main corridor, passing laboratories where scientists studied the intersection of consciousness and quantum mechanics. The architect technology had provided blueprints for devices that could amplify and focus human psychic abilities, though Rebecca insisted on strict ethical protocols for their development and use. The memorial wall displayed photographs of Helen, Hartley, and other early researchers who'd prepared the way for this moment. Helen's prescient planning had protected not just the initial discovery, but the entire transformation process, anticipating resistance and creating legal frameworks that prevented government overreach or corporate exploitation. In the primary conference room, the Institute's advisory board had gathered for their monthly review. The group included activated individuals from every continent, traditional scientists struggling to expand their paradigms, and indigenous elders whose oral traditions had preserved fragments of architect knowledge across millennia. The cellular resonance data is remarkable, reported Dr. Yuki Tanaka, the lead geneticist. We're seeing dormant DNA sequences activating not through mutation, but through consciousness-directed epigenetic changes. People are literally thinking their evolution into existence. Which raises ethical concerns, interjected Dr. James. Right, the bioethicist Rebecca had recruited from Harvard. If consciousness can direct genetic expression, who decides the parameters? We're approaching capabilities that could fundamentally alter human nature. Rebecca took her seat at the round table, deliberately designed to minimize hierarchy. The architects anticipated this dilemma. The activation process includes inherent safeguards, enhanced empathy, expanded perspective, increased awareness of interconnection. The more powerful someone becomes, the less likely they are to misuse that power. Tell that to the purist movement, countered General Martinez, the military liaison assigned to monitor potential security implications. They see activated individuals as threats to human authenticity. We've intercepted communications suggesting they're planning something significant. The discussion continued for hours, covering topics that would have seemed like science fiction a decade ago. Protocols for teaching children to phase through solid matter, guidelines for precognitive individuals sharing future knowledge, ethical frameworks for consciousness-based healing that respected patient autonomy. Rebecca listened with part of her attention, while another aspect of her consciousness monitored the global activation network. She could feel new awakenings occurring worldwide. A fisherman in Indonesia suddenly perceiving the emotional states of marine life. A teacher in Sweden discovering she could see her students' learning patterns as colored auras. A farmer in Kenya finding he could encourage crop growth through focused intention. Each awakening sent ripples through the collective field, strengthening the resonance that facilitated further activations. The process was exponential but self-regulating, preventing sudden changes that might destabilize society. The architect's design revealed its elegance in countless details, balancing transformation with stability. The meeting adjourned with action items addressing the most pressing concerns. Rebecca retreated to her private office, once her grandmother's. Sewing room, now a sanctuary filled with artifacts from various node sites. Each object carried its own resonance, together creating a harmonic field that enhanced clarity and intuition. A secured communication channel chimed, displaying the identifier for the Mongolian node. Rebecca accepted the connection, and a holographic projection materialized. Though the technology was purely human, the transmission enhancement came from architect principles. Director Hartley greeted Dr. Batbuyer, the site administrator. We've made a significant discovery. Deep beneath our primary chamber, we've found what appears to be an activation countdown. The symbols suggest a final phase approaching. Rebecca leaned forward, her interest piqued. Each node had revealed unique aspects of the architect plan, pieces of a vast puzzle that only made sense when assembled collectively. Can you share the specific inscriptions? The hologram shifted to display a wall covered in symbols that seemed to move and breathe with their own life. Rebecca's enhanced perception immediately recognized the pattern. It was a temporal equation, calculating the convergence of multiple cosmic cycles. If our translation is correct, Dr. Batbuyer continued, we have approximately 7 months before something the architects called the harmonic confluence. The inscriptions suggest it's the moment when full species transformation becomes possible. After ending the communication, Rebecca sat in contemplation. The harmonic confluence had been mentioned in several node sites, always in contexts suggesting culmination rather than beginning. If the timeline was accurate, humanity's preparation phase was nearly complete. She found the twins in the Institute's biofeedback laboratory, working with newer activated children on emotional regulation techniques. The sight filled her with maternal pride, tempered by awareness of the responsibilities they carried. Her children had become teachers and guides before reaching high school, their adolescence shaped by gifts that set them apart while connecting them more deeply to humanity. "Mom," Emma greeted, her perception immediately detecting Rebecca's contemplative state. "Something's changed. The field feels different today." Noah looked up from the consciousness mapping display he'd been demonstrating. The probability streams are converging, multiple timelines collapsing into a single path. Is it about the confluence? Rebecca marveled at their casual integration of concepts that still challenged adult physicists. The Mongolian team found a countdown. 7 months, until whatever the architects planned reaches fruition. The twins exchanged a look that spoke of shared understanding beyond words. "We've been dreaming about it," Emma admitted. "All of us have. The activated kids, I mean. Visions of light pillars connecting the nodes, creating a geometric pattern that encompasses the entire planet." "And then?" Rebecca prompted, though part of her already knew. "Choice," Noah replied simply. "Each person choosing their level of activation. Some will embrace full transformation, others will maintain baseline human capabilities, but everyone will be connected, aware of the greater whole, even if they opt for limited personal change." That evening, Rebecca convened an emergency session of the Global Coordination Council, the international body established to oversee humanity's transformation. Representatives from every nation participated through quantum-encrypted channels, their holographic projections creating the illusion of physical presence. "The evidence is conclusive," Rebecca presented, displaying the temporal calculations from multiple nodes. "The harmonic confluence represents the architect's endgame, the moment when humanity can consciously choose its evolutionary path as a collective rather than individuals." The Chinese representative, Minister Wen, leaned forward. "Our scientists confirm similar findings. The question becomes, are we ready? Social disruption from partial activation is already straining many governments. Full species transformation could trigger collapse or transcendence, which is precisely the choice point the architects described," added Dr. Amara Okafor, representing the African Union. "They designed this process to force us past our tribal limitations. We either unite as a species or fragment into competing evolutionary branches." The debate continued through the night, touching on every aspect of human society. Economic systems, based on scarcity, would become obsolete if activated individuals could manifest resources through consciousness manipulation. Educational paradigms would need complete overhaul to teach children who could access information directly from the quantum field. Governance structures designed for baseline humans would struggle to remain relevant. Yet for every challenge, the activated individuals present offered solutions born from expanded perspective. The transformation wasn't just about acquiring new abilities. It was about developing the wisdom to use them constructively. The architect's genetic programming included ethical evolution alongside capability enhancement. As dawn approached, consensus emerged. Humanity would prepare openly for the harmonic confluence, educating the global population about the coming choice point. Every individual would be informed about their options, supported in their decision, and integrated into the new paradigm, regardless of their activation level. The months that followed saw unprecedented global cooperation alongside predictable resistance. The purist movement grew violent, attempting to destroy node sites and assassinate activated individuals. But their efforts were consistently thwarted by precognitives who foresaw attacks and healers who prevented casualties. Rebecca found herself at the center of humanity's most crucial transition, a role she'd never sought but had been genetically destined to fill. The desperate single mother who'd nearly lost everything had become the bridge between humanity's past and future, guided by architect wisdom encoded in her very DNA. The Institute expanded rapidly, training thousands of newly activated individuals in responsible use of their emerging abilities. Emma and Noah led the youth programs, their matter-of-fact acceptance of extraordinary capabilities helping normalize the transformation for others. They developed techniques for consciousness expansion that surpassed anything in the architect records, suggesting humanity might exceed its designers' expectations. As the confluence approached, strange phenomena manifested globally. Aurora-like, lights appeared in daylight, visible only to activated individuals. Animals began behaving differently, gathering in unusual patterns that suggested awareness of impending change. The Earth's magnetic field fluctuated in ways that concerned traditional scientists, but felt harmonious to those attuned to architect frequencies. 3 days before the calculated date, Rebecca stood with her children atop the observation tower, watching energy patterns invisible to baseline human perception. The node network pulsed with increasing intensity, each site contributing its unique frequency to a growing planetary resonance. "Are you afraid?" Emma asked, her voice carrying the wisdom of someone who'd helped hundreds through their activation process. Rebecca considered the question honestly. Not afraid, awed perhaps. We're witnessing the culmination of a plan millions of years in the making. The architects seeded countless worlds with life, but Earth is the first where their creation might consciously choose to join them as equals rather than remaining as children. Noah pointed toward the horizon, where pillars of light were becoming visible even to baseline humans. It's beginning. The node connections are manifesting in normal space-time. By tomorrow, everyone will see the choice literally illuminated before them. The final day arrived with supernatural calm. Across the globe, 12 columns of light rose from the primary nodes, their rays converging at a point above Earth's atmosphere. The geometric pattern they formed was visible from space, a complex mandala that somehow encoded the essence of both human and architect consciousness. At each node site, activated individuals served as guides for the masses who gathered, drawn by instinct or curiosity. Rebecca addressed the crowd at the Hartley Institute, her words broadcast globally alongside similar messages from other node guardians. "Today, humanity chooses its future," she began, her voice carrying the resonance of someone fully aligned with their purpose. The beings who guided our evolution embedded this moment in our genetic code, trusting we would rise to meet it with wisdom and courage. Each of you will feel the invitation to remain as you are or to activate dormant potentials that will transform not just your capabilities, but your consciousness itself. As she spoke, the light pattern intensified and a vibration built. In the air, not sound but something deeper, a frequency that touched the quantum structure of every cell on Earth. The harmonic confluence had begun. Rebecca felt the invitation as a warm presence in her mind, offering glimpses of what full activation would bring. She saw herself as the architect's experienced existence, consciousness unbounded by single body limitation, awareness spanning dimensions, love encompassing all life as extensions of self. Around her, people began making their choices. Some stepped forward into the light pillars, their bodies briefly luminescent as dormant genetics activated fully. Others remained where they were, choosing to maintain their current form while still feeling the connection to the greater whole. There was no judgment in either direction. The architects had designed this as a genuine choice, not a test. The twins stood beside her, their young faces serene with understanding. "We're going through, aren't we?" Emma stated more than asked. Rebecca nodded. "We've been preparing for this our entire lives, even when we didn't know it. The question is, are we choosing it, or is it choosing us?" "Both," Noah replied with a smile. "That's the beauty of conscious evolution. Free will and destiny become the same thing." Together, the three of them stepped into the convergence point where multiple light streams met. Rebecca felt her consciousness expand beyond anything she'd previously experienced. She was still herself, still a mother, still the woman who desperately dug a drainage ditch to save her farm, but also so much more. She could perceive the quantum foam underlying reality, feel the emotional states of beings light years away, understand the mathematical poetry that governed existence itself. Around the world, approximately 1/3 of humanity chose full activation. Another third opted for partial enhancement, enough to perceive the greater unity while maintaining essentially human form. The remainder chose to remain baseline, though even they were forever changed by awareness of the larger reality. The light pillars gradually faded, but the connections they'd established remained. Humanity had become a linked consciousness while preserving individual identity, exactly as the architects had intended. Those who'd chosen full activation found themselves able to phase between physical and energy states, to perceive across dimensions, to heal through intention and create through focused consciousness. More importantly, the enhanced empathy and expanded perspective prevented misuse of these abilities. The more powerful someone became, the more they understood their connection to all life, making selfish or destructive acts literally unthinkable. The architect's greatest gift wasn't power, but wisdom, the capacity to wield transformation responsibly. The Hartley Institute evolved into something beyond a research facility. It became a template for new communities worldwide, places where activated and baseline humans lived together, each contributing their unique perspectives to humanity's continued evolution. The old economic and political systems gradually gave way to structures based on abundance and consensus rather than scarcity and control. Rebecca often returned to the original chamber, now preserved as a historical monument within the expanded complex. She would run her hands over the inscriptions that had started everything, remembering the desperate morning when financial pressure had driven her to dig a simple ditch. The copper plates were displayed in a museum that drew millions of visitors, each seeking to understand the origins of humanity's transformation. The twins grew into their roles as guides for the next generation. Emma developed healing centers that treated not just physical ailments but consciousness itself, helping people integrate their expanded abilities. Noah established prediction institutes that helped humanity navigate potential futures, always emphasizing free will over determinism. Years passed, and the transformed Earth became a beacon for other worlds where the architects had seeded life. Humanity took its place in a vast community of conscious species, each having undergone similar transformations, each contributing unique perspectives to universal evolution. On quiet evenings, Rebecca would stand where her journey had begun, looking out over the valley, where she'd once seen only struggling farmland and financial ruin. Now she perceived layers of reality, the quantum field underlying matter, the consciousness connecting all beings, the probability streams showing infinite possible futures. The failing farm that nobody wanted had become holy ground, the site where humanity consciously chose its destiny. The drainage ditch she'd started in desperation remained visible, marked with a simple plaque. Here began humanity's greatest discovery. Not buried treasure, but dormant potential waiting within us all. Visitors often asked Rebecca if she'd known what would result from that morning's excavation. She would smile and share the truth that had taken years to fully understand. "I thought I was trying to save my family's home. The architects knew I was trying to save humanity's future. In the end, both were the same thing." The story that began with foreclosure notices and custody battles had become legend, not myth, but documented history of how one woman's desperate circumstances aligned with cosmic timing to trigger humanity's metamorphosis. It proved that sometimes the universe's greatest gifts come disguised as insurmountable challenges, waiting for someone desperate enough to dig beneath the surface and discover what was always meant to be found. As Earth's transformed inhabitants reached toward the stars, joining a galactic community of conscious beings, they carried with them the lesson of the Hartley discovery. Evolution isn't just about adapting to circumstances, but about consciously choosing who we become. The architects had provided the potential. Humanity had supplied the courage to embrace it. The chambers beneath Tennessee soil continued to pulse with gentle energy, no longer needed for activation, but serving as reminder that the greatest treasures are often hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment, the right person, the right confluence of need and destiny to bring them into the light. Rebecca's legacy lived not in the artifacts she'd unearthed, but in the potential she'd helped awaken in every human being. The understanding that we are all more than we appear, carrying within us the seeds of transcendence, waiting only for the courage to let them grow. In classrooms throughout the transformed world, children learned about the Hartley discovery as the moment when humanity stopped waiting for salvation from outside and began the greatest adventure of all, the conscious evolution of consciousness itself. And in the quantum field that connected all awakened beings, Rebecca's initial act of desperation resonated eternally as the first note in humanity's symphony of transformation, proving that sometimes the most profound journeys begin with a single, desperate step into the unknown. The story ended where it began, with family, with Earth, with the simple truth that love drives evolution and that every crisis carries within it the seed of transformation. Humanity had passed its great test, not through perfection, but through perseverance, not through power, but through wisdom, not through isolation, but through connection. The architects' experiment had succeeded beyond their designs, creating a species that didn't just use consciousness, but became consciousness itself, aware, compassionate, and ready for whatever wonders the universe might reveal next. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.